Not too long ago, I made a decision to lock myself away in a room with nothing but a laptop and a small amount of savings. At the time, I was working as an apprentice joiner for minimum wage, but my ultimate goal was to build an online business, a clothing brand to be exact. I was just 17 at the time, fresh out of school when I had the idea. I think from schools, we're naturally wired to follow the rules. Show up when we're told to, do the work, and never ask questions. But deep down, I was always curious and wanted more. I was never great at following instructions. I preferred to do my own thing, figure it out, even if this wasn't the right way. I looked up to people who are online, who are young, and have built successful businesses. I studied them. What did they do? What did they all have in common? And how did they get to where they are today? I knew that if I wanted to get to where I wanted to be, I had to do things differently. I wanted to make money, and I also wanted to improve every aspect of my life. Some of the people I admired had just started clothing brands. So this naturally became my first idea. Why not create my own clothing brand from scratch? I simply didn't overthink it. The very next day, I got started creating logos and brainstorming name ideas. I'm not sure if it's just me, but a lot of people would have hesitated on the idea. But for some reason, maybe this is just how I'm wired, I jumped straight in. More often than not, if you overthink and analyze every decision you make, whether that be in business or life, it will hold you back from actually doing what you set out to do. You'll start to come up with reasons not to do the thing or tell yourself it's simply too risky. The most intelligent people tend to overanalyze and hesitate when it comes to taking risks, while those who dive in, don't overthink it, often tend to pave the way. If there's one thing I can tell you from experience is this: just get started. You're not meant to have all of the answers right at the beginning. There's a million different business models out there, and there's no one perfect one. You just have to pick one and commit to working at it for a decade. If you can do that, stick with it, and build momentum, you'll be ahead of most people who constantly jump from idea to idea and never actually gain any real traction. The first few years, yes, you did hear me right, were spent locked in my office, trying to figure things out. I was generating sales, but nothing actually seemed to take off. I spent months banging my head against the wall, wondering what was actually wrong. The truth is, I just wasn't good enough, and the market made that clear. When you're starting something new, you're going to suck at it, and that's absolutely fine, because every person who's great at what they do was once in the same position as you. They just kept going until one day they became great. This is what I like to call the test. Most people give up during this phase, but the ones who keep pushing through, despite all odds, are the ones who eventually find success. Starting a business with little money is very hard. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But don't let that actually stop you, because the hardest things are often the most rewarding. Some people get better cards in life. That is just the way it is. But you have to play the hand that you're dealt. You'll never truly know why someone else is successful. Was it timing? Was it simply luck? Or was it pure chance? What I do know is, if you don't make that decision to start, you'll never put yourself in a position to catch one of those moments. Knowing when to pivot when something isn't working is a skill in itself. This doesn't mean throwing in the towel when things get tough. It's about recognizing when the time is to try a new approach. Looking back today, it's very easy to see exactly where I was going wrong. As they say, hindsight is a wonderful thing. The tough part is, there is no right or wrong answer. It's simply up to you to figure these things out. I can tell you how many times that people told me to quit. They said, doesn't make sense, you're not seeing results. Most people would have thrown in the towel right there and then. But there's a big difference between people giving up and realize when something isn't actually working and needs a change. I was 2+ years in at this time and had only generated around 50,000 in sales with literally no profit. Something had to change. So I began actually experimenting with the brand, altering our direction and revamping the brand image. By this point, I'd run out of all my funds and I was sitting on empty. Sometimes the best place to be when you need a drastic change is right back at the bottom, because from there, the only way is up. It's tough in the moment, but hitting that low point forces you to think differently. It pushes you to tap into a level of creativity that you didn't know you actually had, just to get yourself out of that current situation. At the time, my clothing brand wasn't going anywhere. I had stock piling up in my office, just collecting dust, and needed to sell through it fast. That's when I started looking into other business models, and I came across a business model called dropshipping. From what I read online, you didn't need much to get started. You could simply sell products that you didn't actually have to buy up front. All my cash was tied up in stock, and I was completely out of money. I'd already gone full-time by this point, and honestly, in hindsight, it was one of the best decisions I made. Sometimes you have to put your back up against the wall to give you no choice but to just figure things out. My first 3 stores failed, but the 4th one, that's when things actually started to click. You can go through years worth of struggle and then all of a sudden something just clicks. It's almost like you spend all of your time learning what not to do, and then finally it just clicks. I started scaling up the new business while I was still running my clothing brand in the background, as that was my ultimate long-term goal. All I can say is, when you start to gain momentum, lean into it as much as you possibly can. And that was my mindset at the time, and I simply went all in. You should never shy away from risk. At the end of the day, it's a risk just being alive. Getting in your car, crossing the street, going to work, but the more risks you actually take, the more resilient you become. It's almost like a muscle. The more you tear it, the more it rebuilds and gets stronger. And honestly, as long as you're still breathing, there's food on the table and a roof over your head, you don't have any excuse not to go for it. Through this new business model, I was learning new skills fast, but I was also applying everything I learned from starting my own clothing brand, especially around the branding aspect. Slowly but surely, the numbers started to grow, and we kept it simple. Whatever worked, we doubled down on it. More of what moved the needle and less what actually didn't. At this point, I was running everything myself, and that's when I realized I'd hit a ceiling. I was working from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. every day, and instead of actually focusing on growth, my energy was just going into keeping things afloat. Daily tasks started piling up. I was doing everything from customer service, to marketing, to website, to fulfillment. Everything inside the business, and it didn't give me time to focus on actually growing the business. That's when I started looking to hire. The truth is, I had no idea what I was doing at the time. I was just 20 years old, and the idea of hiring someone older created this almost imposter syndrome. It was like I was doing something I shouldn't be doing. As things started to pick up, I knew I couldn't do everything myself anymore. Our team started to grow. I hired people I never even met in person from all across the world to help with our customer service, to help with admin and other tasks. I brought in friends to help pick and pack orders. I started to delegate and to give people ownership over specific tasks and roles. The shift that actually changed everything. Suddenly, I had the headspace to actually grow the business and to focus on the things that I was actually good at, the marketing, the product, and the building the brand. As a result, we started to scale even more. We refined ourselves as a brand. We invested heavily in shoots, in content, and overall the whole brand image. What I will say is that if you are building a brand, you don't have to have it all figured out from the start. My brand went through multiple transitions, and it's only once we tested multiple things that we actually found our niche within the market. We found out what our customer wanted and how we could actually sell to them. Growing up, I'd always dreamed of owning a supercar. I've always been big on setting goals and working towards something, and for me, cars were my thing. At a certain point in the business, I hit some big milestones and felt like it was a time to reward myself. The Audi R8 V10 had always been my dream car. I had it written down on my goals from early on, and it was one of the reasons why I started my business. I worked tirelessly to get to a place where I could actually buy one, and finally, I eventually did. That moment was a huge level up for me. It gave me a massive boost. My work ethic went through the roof because for the first time, I could see something tangible in return for the long nights, sacrifices, and stress that I went through to get here. If you're young and you've put in the work, you've delayed the gratification, and now you're finally in a position to buy your dream car, what I will say is just go for it. You're only young once, and trust me, it will level you up. But here's the truth that no one tells you. 2 months after buying that car, I already wanted the newer model. And that's when it truly hit me. This is a never-ending cycle. The material stuff feels good for a moment, but it's fleeting, and it never makes you truly fulfilled. The real fulfillment comes from the journey, and you only realize this once you've actually been through this. From who you become to actually achieving that goal. When you go through the times that you've been through to get towards that goal, that is when you look back and think that was the real fulfillment. If you're hearing this now, it might just go through one ear and out the other. You might have to experience it yourself to really understand what I'm saying. And that's okay. Just to know the goal isn't the car itself. The goal is who you become on the way to achieving that goal. There's a lot more to this story than shown in this short film. One of many setbacks and successes. But I wanted to just leave you with a few things. Never underestimate the power of focus. Taking yourself away from everybody else with no distractions and just simply figuring things out. This is where you'll find the real breakthroughs. Failure is inevitable. You will fail, and all of the time. But you have to be okay with that. If you're not, you'll always be scared to take the risks that actually matter. Every new level of your journey will demand a new version of you. You've got to become that person, constantly evolving, constantly learning, and the moment you think you've got it all figured out is the moment you've already lost.